The thumb, most of the thumb movements that we're going to look at are actually taking place at the carpometacarpal joint. So you want to make sure that you have lined your goniometer up with the CMC joint and not the MCP joint. So this movement, thumb coming away from the hand like that, that is abduction. So we're going to have our stationary arm lined up along the second metacarpal. So you might actually need to feel for it and line it up there. Your axis is like right there in the snuff box, actually a little bit proximal to that. And then your movable arm has to line up with that first metacarpal. So you need to feel those and make sure that you're lined up. Again, don't look at the thumb, because the thumb could be hyperextended or in a little bit of flexion, and the goniometer won't line up with it. All we care about are the first and second metacarpal bones. So there is thumb CMC abduction. Now if we're doing thumb CMC extension, that's the one that's like loser, and it might look like it's a lot if you're measuring here, but remember the movement is taking place from here. So again, I'm finding that bone, and this one's on the second metacarpal, and this one's on the first metacarpal. So in this one, for example, I have about 35 degrees, where if I had done it here, it looks like we have 90. But it's really 35 degrees. That is thumb CMC extension. Now CMC flexion is when it moves across the palm of the hand. It would be very difficult to try to measure this because one's lying on top of the other. So we don't measure thumb CMC flexion with a goniometer. Instead, what we're really looking at is, can you touch your thumb to the base of your little finger? Then I know you've gotten thumb CMC flexion. And opposition, we would simply look at, are you able to touch the tip of the pad of your thumb to the pads of your fingers? And if someone can't get all the way, this is one of those things where we might measure the distance using the little ruler on the end of the goniometer and look instead at the distance between the thumb and the fingertip, as opposed to measuring anything with a goniometer. Okay? So then if we're doing MCP at the thumb or the fingers, we're going to use one of the other goniometers. I'm going to use this one because this is my personal favorite, which is good, except it's not good for hyperextension. But what I'm going to do, we'll do thumb, MCP, and IP joint. You simply lay it on there. In this case, we're doing active range, so go ahead and bend here. And I will have it laying so that it is flat on the skin on both sides, on the metacarpal and on the first phalanx. And I'll measure it there, and the same thing when I'm doing the IP joint. Now you noticed I turned the goniometer around, and that's just because I just have to put it wherever this isn't going to get in the way. When I do the hand, let me do your other hand so it doesn't have a ring. When I do the hand, I will generally do all the MCPs at one point. So I will say, go ahead and bend your fingers at this joint, and I'll go through and I'll measure. Okay, that is 88, 90, that's about 85. Oh, I said the about word, never say that. 85. So, and I saw them first, they all started here, so everything was 0. So then I would write all of my MCPs, and I have the long end hanging off, so it's not, I don't do it this way because then it hits the wrist. Then I would say, okay, now bend your fingers at this joint, and I would go through and do all the PIP joints, and then I would say same thing, and then I would go through and do all the DIP joints. Okay. Now if I was using this goniometer and she had some hyperextension, which she doesn't have, but if she did, I would have to do it from this side. You could do it on me. Right? So you'd have to do it from the volar aspect, and you can measure the hyperextension that way. If you use one of the other goniometers that has hyperextension, you'd be able to do it from that side. Okay, now manual muscle testing. Remember, in the hand, with the hand, we do not use pluses and minuses because gravity doesn't matter. So you want to just get in a position that's comfortable, and lots of times I will put the person in this neutral position. And I'll say, can you bring your thumb out here? Now remember, this is a CMC movement, so I have to give resistance here on the thenar eminence. Hold it and don't let me push it back. So that was CMC abduction. Stabilizing here, pushing here. Then I can keep her in the same position. Can you bring your thumb up here? Hold it and don't let me push it down. So that was CMC extension. If I wanted to do flexion, I could say bring your thumb across, hold it, and don't let me pull it out. And that was CMC flexion. Okay? When you are doing MCP now, you have to stabilize the CMC joint. So I have to keep that from moving. And now I'll say, can you straighten your thumb all the way? Hold it and don't let me push it. So that was MCP extension. Now bend it there and don't let me pull it out. That's MCP flexion. Same thing if I'm doing IP, I have to stabilize the MCP joint. Go ahead and hold that straight. Don't let me bend it. Now you bend it and don't let me straighten it. So you always have to stabilize the joint before. If you're doing thumb CMC, you're okay, but if you're doing thumb MCP, you have to stabilize the CMC. And if you're doing thumb IP, you have to stabilize the MCP joint. Same thing with the fingers, and you're probably going to do them all together unless there's an injury where you're really looking at a specific finger. But I'll say straighten your fingers out all the way. You do have a little hyperextension. Okay, now hold it and don't let me bend them. So you see I'm putting it here on the proximal phalanx. I'm not crossing another joint. Now go ahead and bend your fingers. And here I'm just going to put my finger inside. Don't let me straighten it. So I'm doing the MCP. I'm going to do it on this one. Okay. So the MCPs are bent. Hold it and don't let me straighten it. Might do 1 or 2 fingers, whatever I can fit. So I'm stabilizing at the wrist and giving resistance just on the proximal phalanx. Same thing then if I was doing the IPs, I'd be stabilizing the MCPs and pulling out, or stabilizing the PIP, which you're not really going to do. Not really going to do manual muscle testing of the DIPs. Okay? All right. Thank you very much.